Hitler admirers, Stalin admirers, Jew haters, American haters, Churchill haters. You're damn right we're going to cancel them and deplatform them. It's called the market system. They don't have a lifetime job like a bureaucrat who we're going to protect. And if they're your friend, there's something wrong with you.
So there's currently a all-out war in the conservative movement. It is represented by conservative media, and if you've missed it, you haven't been paying attention, because the most notable figures in conservative media are in this fight right now at this moment, and some of the most controversial figures are participating as well, and obviously the left-wing media is trying to put their thumb on the scale for who they want to win. So I think it's important for us to talk about on this channel where I think conservative media and the conservative movement is going, and whether or not I think that's a good thing. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
So make no mistake about it, this war has been brewing for a long time. The undercurrent of disagreement and fundamental differences has been building up over the past few years, and by the way, all of this is agitated by the post-October 7th Israeli-Palestinian war, and obviously the division on that has spawned and spiraled basically out of control to the point where you have these conservative media figures constantly attacking one another. And it's important for us to all understand the factions of this particular war, because a lot of people get lumped in together that don't necessarily belong together. So I think it's smart of us to break them down into 4 different divisions of people, because I think that will help you understand what the hell is going on when you see all of these people fighting constantly. So first and foremost, you have Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. Now, Nick has been canceled for the last 10 years. He's been building up his audience in all these different various places and has essentially punched his way into the mainstream, and Nick is somebody who considers himself further to the right than every other group that are actually being talked about in this particular conflict. And this is because while you'll have people in our next faction, which are like the Candace Owens and the Tucker Carlson, try their best to keep the conversation to Zionism and the Israeli lobby, Nick Fuentes outright says that he is worried about global Jewry, because for him, it's not necessarily Israel itself, it happens to be the Jews having too much control throughout world society. So he's definitely the furthest in that particular camp, but right next to him is, of course, the Tucker Carlson and the Candace Owenses. Now, to be clear, Candace Owens is kind of lumped in here with Tucker Carlson because these were both mainstream media figures that basically split from a more establishment form of alternative media, but I could see the argument for putting Candace Owens closer to Nick. But right now, as of this moment, I want to talk about Tucker and, of course, Candace. So obviously, they have drifted further away from the regular base of conservative media that is represented by Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin and all these other establishment mainstream media figures, and they have received a ton of backlash for this, and most recently, they have gotten backlash, specifically Tucker Carlson, due to the fact that he platformed Nick Fuentes and honestly went super soft on him throughout the course of the interview. Now, to be clear, I do agree that Tucker Carlson did not press Nick at all whatsoever, and it's actually impressive when you compare and contrast his interview with Ted Cruz to his interview with Nick Fuentes. But in Tucker's defense, he had a response to this critique when he was talking to Megyn Kelly, and part of me wants to agree with Tucker on that particular response.
Nick Fuentes has said a long list of very vile things.
Big time, including attacking my dad, which was the most vile of all, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I personally have watched videos of him questioning the Holocaust, likening it to baking cookies in the oven, and there's no way you could have gotten to 6 million, seems to be his theory. He seemed to think that we've way overstated the number of Jews killed in the Holocaust. He's ripped on poor Usha Vance in the most offensive terms, which I mean, so what do you say to those people? Say, why didn't you raise any of that?
You know, do your own interview the way that you want to do it. You're not my editor. Buzz off. I mean, I don't know. You want to go yell at Nick Fuentes? I'll give you his cell. Call him. And go sit and yell at him and feel virtuous or whatever. That's up to you. I got the same thing with Putin. Why aren't you yelling at him? Okay, why? So I can show that I'm a good person? I care about what my wife thinks, my children think, and God thinks. And that's it. I don't need to prove that I'm a good person to you. You may think I'm a terrible person. Okay, I'm just doing my thing, which is I want to understand what people think. and I'm committed to that. And if you don't like it, don't watch. That's my view.
Yeah, look, I do disagree with the way that Tucker Carlson conducted that interview. I think he can push back on people when he's willing to, and it would have been a more interesting interview if they actually talked about the things and the controversies that they had with one another in a little bit more depth. But to a certain extent, it's Tucker Carlson's show. He can conduct the interviews how he wants, and if you don't like that and you have a large conservative media platform, then you can bring Nick on and you can conduct the interview the way that you prefer to do so. So there's something about that is just salient and true right there, even though, again, I'm actually somebody who's been disagreeing with Tucker Carlson for a very long time. But again, we will get into that a little bit later. The next faction is, of course, what is being labeled as the neoconservative faction, and this is represented by the Ben Shapiros, the Mark Levins, and all the other people that want to stay the course in terms of America's presence abroad, and of course, obviously, the underlying thing that is causing the division right now in this moment is the issue of Israel. Now, the fourth camp is the Matt Walsh camp, who doesn't want to have all this fighting among the right wing. He wants people to unify, and I just want to knock out this camp right now at this moment, because in reality, in my opinion, you can't really unify with people when you have these deep ideological divides. Again, a lot of these people consider Israel and America's relationship with that nation at the top of their priorities list. Now, of course, people will often be very quick to point that out as something that is true with a Ben Shapiro or Mark Levin or any of the neoconservative types, but it's also true for the Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes types. I mean, Tucker Carlson, after the election of Zohran Mamdani as the New York City mayor, ended up releasing like a little email letter or something of the sort where he defended Zohran Mamdani. And I'm sorry, guys, but I cover New York City politics a lot. I live in New York City. I didn't want a communist to be elected to the mayor of New York City, so I can't pull a Matt Walsh and just unite with Tucker Carlson when Tucker Carlson is pushing the exact opposite of what I believe, and his justification for a local New York City mayoral position is that we have a good agreement on foreign policy with Mamdani between Tucker and him. Like, no, that's Israel first. Like, let's be perfectly honest. If you're going to get rid of all conservative values and base everything based on the position on Israel, you are Israel first. You're just anti-Israel as opposed to the Israel people that are pro-Israel, and that's why they put it first. So yeah, for me, that's a no-go. That's a non-starter. I actually think the fighting is good. I actually think it is important because you can't actually have people rowing in different directions and say, oh, well, as long as we get to the goal, then it's totally fine. When again, people have different goals. Like for me, Zohran Mamdani being elected the mayor of New York City, not a good thing. It's not worthy of praise. I don't give a damn about his Israel position, just like I didn't give a damn about Andrew Cuomo's position. And I criticize Andrew Cuomo for running a huge portion of his campaign on the fact that Mamdani didn't like Israel. Now again, while there are many things that Tucker Carlson has said and done over the last couple of years that I have disagreed with, I mean, he did that video in the Russian grocery store where he was like, oh, Russia is being so successful because look at the cost of food in Russia, never actually telling people that cost of food, that $100 for a week's worth of groceries that he overestimated would cost $400 in the United States of America. Even if true that it were that big of a difference based on Russian incomes, that would be too much money for the Russian people to feed themselves on. And yet Tucker Carlson, in a very propagandistic way, called that a success of the Russian state.
Guess you put in 10 rubles here and you get it back when you put the cart back. So it's free, but there's an incentive to return it and not just bring it to your homeless encampment.
Hey guys, editing Sean here, and I just want to pause at this moment because I forgot that this was in the clip of Tucker at the grocery store, but him praising where you put the coin in to get the cart and then that makes you return it is one of the most unironically hilarious things humanly possible because it shows that Tucker never goes to the grocery store, and he definitely doesn't go to the grocery store in bad neighborhoods. Because do you know where they have this system where you have to put in a quarter in order to get a cart? The ghetto. The hood, because bad areas, bad neighborhoods don't return the grocery cart. Now, again, it's actually the issue of the price that I have an issue with in this particular video, but this was just too funny for me to not comment on. I mean, come on, Tucker. This is maximum shilling.
I went from amused to legitimately angry So we were guessing what this would cost. Everybody hears from the United States, buys groceries, and we didn't pay any attention to costs as we were just putting in the cart what we would actually eat over a week. And we all came in around $400, about $400. It was $104 US here. And that's when you start to realize that ideology maybe doesn't matter as much as you thought, corruption. If you take people's standard of living and you tank it through filth and crime and inflation, and they literally can't buy the groceries they want, at that point, maybe it matters less what you say or whether you're a good person or a bad person. You're wrecking people's lives in their country, and that's what our leaders have done to us.
For me, I'm not going to divide with somebody over an issue involving a foreign country and their conflict like the nation of Israel, but when you start doing propaganda on American enemies, and you do so to the detriment of the United States of America, that's a red flag, and that's something that I have always wondered about ever since I saw that particular segment, and it's made me much more cautious of Tucker Carlson going forward, and I think that is worthy of mention in this particular segment. That being said, Mark Levin basically made himself the most unlikable person in conservative media by giving a ridiculous speech about how, yeah, we're gonna cancel people, we're gonna cancel Tucker Carlson, and honestly, I gotta play this for you because you need to see it for yourself.
And I just want the anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-West crowd to understand something. You're going to have to come through me and millions of people just like me, and you're not going to make it. You think your stupid little podcast or your stupid little subscription program or your little TV show or maybe you have a little radio show is going to change the world like hell it is, not if I and everybody else have something to say about it.
Now look, Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro are basically in the same camp when it comes to who they're fighting against, who their enemies are, but if you compare this ridiculous speech from Mark Levin to Ben Shapiro's 45-minute episode where he actually made claims about Tucker Carlson and then provided clips, Ben's version or Ben's argumentation, where he actually argues, much more convincing, much more compelling. Again, you can disagree with it. I know a lot of people despise Ben Shapiro. I know a lot of people say, well, Ben and Mark Levin agree on the key issues, and that is a dispute that I'm not willing to let go. But the tactics clearly better from Ben versus Mark Levin. But Mark Levin also is ridiculous in another way, in that Tucker Carlson is larger and more successful than Mark Levin. The idea that Mark Levin is going to be able to cancel people that are more effective and obviously have a larger share of the conservative audience is absurd and ridiculous. Like, it's absolutely asinine. Like, you are way overestimating your power. And for you to say, oh, your rinky-dink little podcast and subscription service or radio show is not going to stand up to me and the millions of people behind me, Mark Levin, you're a radio show host too. And in fact, you have a smaller audience. And the idea that somebody is subscription funded, like me over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join, and that therefore makes them weaker than you who has some form of corporate funding behind you. No, people are not going to buy into that. People are not going to like that. People like the idea that you have audience supported media. And honestly, like Mark Levin, I would dismiss him from the ranks if I were on that side of the issue. And he is probably the most likely reason why the Ben Shapiro camp is not going to come out ahead in this particular battle.
Hitler admirers, Stalin admirers, Jew haters, American haters, Churchill haters. You're damn right we're going to cancel them and deplatform them.
I mean, seriously, people, those clips are going around. I believe they happened at the Republican Jewish Coalition. And one of the things that's also notable is that the crowd is not even really cheering all that much for all these different speakers that are now talking about cancellation like it's a good thing. And again, it's just not a good look. It is not a good argument to go on. And it honestly makes Mark Levin sound more desperate and more pathetic. Again, you compare that to Ben Shapiro's show, which of course you can disagree with. You could say you don't like Ben. Ben said, this isn't about cancellation. This is about going after people. And by the way, Ben made one of the points that I think that a lot of people who are talking about how we shouldn't have fighting amongst conservative media should make more often, which is the very same people who say don't attack people on your own side are the ones constantly attacking people. Like Tucker Carlson, again, you might agree with him. In fact, based on Tucker's popularity, I'm almost certain a majority of my audience agrees with him. But the idea that he isn't going after Barry Shapiro frequently on his show while simultaneously having people run cover for him saying that you shouldn't be going after Tucker Carlson because of conservative infighting is absurd. Like, I think we should all scrap this notion of no fighting people, no naming names, and actually have this fight, have this battle. Let the best ideas come to the top, actually live by the principles that we've been stating for over a decade in the face of leftist cancellation, because I don't genuinely think that the worst ideas are going to come to the forefront, even if the left-wing media is pushing for more division in the conservative media movement. And this is where we got to jump back to Nick Fuentes, because I know that there are a lot of people in conservative media that are Nick Fuentes fans behind the scenes, people who wouldn't say so openly, who are slowly inching toward embracing him in honestly kind of cowardly ways, because if you like the guy, you should just actually say it. You should actually endorse him if you want to do that, rather than just like shadowily boosting his ideas while simultaneously trying to maintain plausible deniability, because in my opinion, this kind of cowardice actually lends itself to the power of the cancellation culture that you're saying you're trying to fight against. But we need to also point out the obvious, which is the fact that the mainstream media is also interested in elevating Nick Fuentes, and this is because they believe that Nick will destroy the conservative movement from within. And again, whether or not you believe that's true, neither here nor there, or as the professionals would like to say, neither nya nor nya. The point is, the mainstream media actually believes it, and this is why you're seeing a bunch of articles that are declaring Nick Fuentes the heir of the conservative movement, the heir to Charlie Kirk, which sounds like a headline that comes from some fringe right-wing outlet, but it's actually a headline from the New York Times. Now look, the left-wing media trying to elevate Fuentes and encourage more of this fighting on the right wing should be surprising to no one. However, I will say, and this is a warning to those of you out there in the left wing, that this might not be the great strategy that you think it is, because they're under the belief that if you elevate Fuentes, it will be easier to target and destroy people in conservative media based on all the crazy things that Nick has said over the years, all the edgy things that he said, all the things about Jews in particular, not Israelis or Zionists that he said. But in reality, this is something that Hillary Clinton and her campaign tried. They called it the Pied Piper strategy, where they essentially encouraged the mainstream media to cover now President of the United States Donald Trump, because they didn't think he was a serious candidate, and they thought that President Trump would lead to the destruction of the Republicans electorally in 2016. How did that work out for you? How did it work out for you giving him billions of dollars of free media coverage under the premise that he can't possibly win, and then he turned out and won? So you doing this for Nick, even though they think Nick is going to somehow destroy the conservative media movement from within, might actually backfire. It might backfire in the absolute worst way, worse than these people are all expecting, because I do believe that folks over at the New York Times don't actually want Nick to be successful. They would rather him be the leader of a dying movement. But again, you're tempting fate when you start promoting people for the purpose of having them get to the top, for the purpose of hoping that that will destroy the movement. We are a deeply divided country. Every presidential election has been nearly 50-50 over the last, couple of years, decades, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, you elevating this guy to the top, who's obviously talented and charismatic, is likely to backfire and blow up in your face, because there is a chance that Nick wins out in the end. Now look, I've talked about this before. I was at like a CPAC event or a Turning Point event, and Nick was running a parallel event that was like right after it, but like during the same cycle. And we actually made our way over there, a bunch of people in conservative media. And one of the things you realize if you actually meet Nick is that the guy is pretty politically savvy. He made it a point to introduce himself to each and every single person. If you were even a YouTuber like me that does not have much notoriety, and by the way, this was years ago, so I had a much smaller audience, he knew who you were, he knew who the players were, and he totally went on a charm offensive to a lot of people that came over in our group, because he understands the power, even if he doesn't get people to publicly endorse him, of winning hearts and minds. The guy has a strategy. The guy has a plan. All of that bluster and outrage that people see being portrayed in the mainstream media, that is to draw more attention, get more viral clips in order to suck people in to his ideology. And yes, to a certain extent, it is working. I mean, again, he's being interviewed by PBD. He's being interviewed by Tucker Carlson. He is getting getting himself on all of these platforms from once being the most canceled man in the United States of America. And if you don't realize that elevating him with mainstream outlets like the New York Times in the hopes that he will be the self-destruct button for the conservatives is a mistake, then you're not paying attention. And again, I say this as someone who, if you watch my channel, have made it clear that I have a lot of disagreements with the Fuentes types. And yeah, the idea that he can't win in the end is just absurd. It's just ridiculous. And by the way, this actually runs contrary to strategies that have worked in the past, and by the way, have been implemented by people like the late Charlie Kirk. When Nick and his groypers started going to Turning Point events and targeting Charlie Kirk and trying to call him out for his position on immigration and for the organization not being religious enough, what did Charlie do? Charlie didn't embrace Nick and bring him into the fold. What he did was pluck some ideas from Nick that were gaining in popularity, and he assimilated them into the Turning Point organization, because make no mistake about it, Turning Point definitely changed their position on immigration due to the backlash that was ginned up by Nick Fuentes. And of course, Charlie ended up starting all these different religious organizations within Turning Point, where he got a bunch of pastors together to make sure they were locking down the religious undercurrent that was also supporting Nick. This is very similar to the strategy that the Republicans did when David Duke started raising the issue of affirmative action, which was take the issue and leave the person. If you actually want to defeat somebody like Nick, then what you have to do is figure out the issues that he's bringing up that you think are worthwhile, that can be assimilated into the movement, and then you cut him out of the process after the fact. You essentially take the animating issues for his base, assimilate that into the conservative movement as long as it aligns with values that you already have, a la affirmative action, and then you don't have to include the person if that's ultimately your goal, which a lot of people seem to believe that their goal is to make sure Nick does not take over the conservative mainstream. Again, the only people that are outwardly in favor of that are the left-wing media, because they think Nick will destroy the mainstream of conservatism. But again, even that is not a guarantee and is also a dangerous game. But that's how you would do it historically with somebody who occupies a similar space to Nick Fuentes. Now, obviously, David Duke, different figure, different base, all that. We understand that. That's just an example that I'm giving. But that's how you would do it. That's how you would actually fight back if you had any intelligence. But unfortunately, the Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin side has Mark Levin in it, and he appears to not have any intelligence at all whatsoever, so he thinks his dumbass radio show is going to cancel Tucker Carlson. Now, with all that being said, I want to know what you guys think about all this. I try to give a fair analysis and fair critiques to each and every party that participated or is participating in this particular fight, but I leave the question up to you on who you think is going to win this battle within the conservative movement, and also, in addition to that, who do you think should win, like morally should win this particular battle, because this is actually multiple different questions. Also, do you think I was being a little bit unfair to Matt Walsh's camp, which is like the kumbaya, let's just ignore these fundamental differences, get along, and try to move forward to a fundamentally similar goal, even though I don't think the goal is actually all that similar at this moment in time. Again, let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the war that is currently ongoing in conservative media. Till next time.